Enter flow. That strange, effortless feeling when everything lines up and you stop being an audience to your own life. You know the moment. Your hands move before you've had a thought about them. The minutes collapse into a single, long pulse, and the little inner critic that nags about mistakes simply goes quiet. Athletes call it being in the zone. Musicians call it surrender. Scientists call it transient hypofrontality. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of doubt and self-monitoring, turns down the volume so you can act without overthinking. That shutdown is part of the trick. When the brain reduces self-talk, those circuits that constantly edit and second-guess give the rest of you permission to run at full speed. At the same time, dopamine and norepinephrine flood the system. Dopamine sharpens motivation and pattern recognition. Norepinephrine tightens attention and response time. The result feels almost supernatural, but it isn't magic. It's the mind running leaner and faster, freed from commentary and fear. Think about a time you lost track of time doing something hard and strangely easy at the same time. A run where your stride felt automatic. A painting where each stroke knew the next. A coding sprint where bugs seemed to fix themselves. That's the sweet spot where skill and challenge match. If the task is too easy, boredom creeps in and the brain wanders. If it's too hard, anxiety spikes and you freeze. Flow lives between those extremes, demanding enough to require all your resources, but not so demanding that you break. What the experience feels like is important. Time compresses. An hour becomes a blink. Motion feels inevitable, like you're being guided by a thread that only you can follow. Self-awareness fades. There's no inner commentary about how you look or what others might think. Consciousness becomes pure doing. It's one of the rare places where performance and presence are the same thing. Flow is rare, but you can stack the deck for it. Start with clarity. Define a clear, immediate goal and a way to measure progress. Remove distractions. Close tabs, silence notifications, create physical boundaries. Tune challenge to skill, slightly raise the difficulty, or shrink the time window. Warm up so your body and mind can find rhythm. Give yourself short feedback loops so the brain can learn and adjust in real time. Most importantly, notice the feeling when it arrives and protect it. Flow fades quickly under interruption and self-judgment. When you do find it, let go. Don't narrate. Don't analyze. Trust the quiet brain and the chemistry that's working for you. What looks like surrender is actually the highest efficiency of thought and action. Not an absence of control, but the most fluent form of it. Gravity. Think of gravity not as a mysterious hand tugging you down, but as the shape of the road you're walking on. When you stand on Earth, you're moving along the straightest possible path in a space that's been bent by the planet's mass. That bending is gravity. A helpful picture is the old rubber sheet analogy. Place a heavy ball on a stretched sheet and it makes a dip. Roll a marble near the edge and it circles the heavier ball. Not because the heavy ball is reaching out and grabbing it, but because the marble is following the curved surface. Replace the sheet with space and time, the heavy ball with Earth, and the marble with the moon. The moon doesn't fall into Earth because something pulls it inward. It orbits because its straight-line motion in curved space-time keeps bringing it around. That idea flipped how physicists think about everything. Einstein said space and time are woven together. Tug on one and the other ripples. So mass and energy tell space-time how to curve, and curved space-time tells objects how to move. Even the apple on your kitchen counter is obeying geometry. The apple didn't fall because Earth reached up. It fell because the straightest path available in the curved fabric points down. What looks like a force is really a shortcut your body takes through a bent landscape. This is more than a poetic picture. It touches how we live. Every atom warps the field around it, subtle but real. The effect is tiny on a pen or a coffee mug, huge for planets and stars. And because space and time are linked, gravity changes the flow of time itself. Clocks closer to a mass run a touch slower than clocks farther away. That's why engineers correct GPS satellites' clocks. The satellites experience weaker gravity than our street-level receivers, so, without correction, our maps would drift by meters each day. It's a practical consequence of the same curvature that keeps the moon in motion. On a personal level, that changes how you think about down. Down is not an absolute direction in some universal force field. It's the direction a free-falling object moves in the local curvature. Stand on a mountain versus at the beach, and the curvature is slightly different. The geometry of space-time around you has a different shape, and clocks and falling paths reflect that. You don't feel the curvature directly because you're usually supported by a floor, a chair, or your own bones pushing back. But every time you jump and come back down, you're following space-time's contours. I remember the moment the rubber sheet image clicked for me. It took a force that had always felt like destiny and gave it a map. Once you see gravity as geometry, a lot of old questions simplify. Orbits, tides, time shifts. They're all natural outcomes of a fabric being bent. Gravity, in this view, isn't attraction so much as geometry pretending to be force. Next, we'll take that geometric idea and look at what happens when space-time is bent really extremely, where the curving becomes a canyon and our simple analogies begin to break down. Dopamine. Dopamine gets the blame for pleasure in pop culture, but that's misleading. Dopamine isn't the chemical of pleasure, it's the chemical of pursuit. It wakes up when you imagine something you want, not when you've already got it. Think about the last time you were hooked on a show, a game, or your phone. It wasn't the 100th notification that thrilled you, it was the thought that the next one might be different. Dopamine spikes when there's uncertainty and a hint of reward. Each spike tells your brain, you're close, keep going. Then it falls off, and you feel that itch again. That rise and fall loop is what makes scrolling, gaming, and flirting feel addictive. Every reward is unpredictable, every hit unpredictable. The variable interval schedule, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, is built to keep you trying. This is also why goals feel more exciting than achievements. The moment I'm chasing a deadline or training for a race, I'm buzzing. The imagine you in crossing the line version of success sends dopamine flooding through my system. But cross the line, collect the medal, and suddenly the buzz evaporates. The success is real, but the chemical incentive that got you there has no reason to keep firing. That drop doesn't mean your achievement was worthless. It means your brain is designed to keep you moving toward the next horizon. Dopamine didn't just make us restless consumers. It's the engine of curiosity, hunger, and innovation. It's the reason someone kept sketching better bridges, kept refining tools, kept telling stories that became cities and civilizations. We imagine a better world, feel the pull to test it, learn from near misses, and try again. Without that restless, future-oriented drive, we'd probably still be sitting comfortably where our ancestors were thousands of years ago. But there's a cost. Because dopamine loves the chase more than the catch, contentment can feel fleeting. I remember finishing a big project and feeling drained. Proud, yes, but oddly ready for the next thing to make me feel alive again. That's normal. The trick isn't to wage war on the chase. It's to recognize when chasing becomes automatic and take a deliberate pause to notice that you're already here. So how do you pause? Small, practical things. When you complete something, stop and name it out loud. I finished this. Breathe, look at the result, touch it, take a photo, write a line in a victory log. Create little rituals that tell your brain this isn't just the end of a pursuit, it's a moment worth staying in. Slow the sensory intake, turn off feeds that give variable rewards for a while, and practice savoring. Sit with the feeling of accomplishment for a minute, instead of instantly replacing it with the next goal. Dopamine will keep pushing you forward, and that's a gift. The goal isn't to kill the momentum, but to learn the art of arrival. Recognize the spike, enjoy the chase, and when you cross the line, let yourself stay there for a minute. That pause is where contentment grows, even if it's only temporary, and those tiny pauses add up. Anxiety. Anxiety shows up like a fast-forwarded movie in my head. Scenes of what might go wrong, loud and detailed, long before anything actually happens. That's the trick to understand. Anxiety is imagination working too hard. The same neural circuits that let us invent stories, sketch a painting, or plan a winning strategy are the ones that also invent worst-case scenarios. They're powerful, they're useful. Sometimes they just point in the wrong direction. Physically, it feels obvious. The heart ramps up, digestion shuts down, shoulders knot, and a low hum of alertness takes over. That's your body's ancient preparation instinct, the fight or flight reflex, kicking in without permission. Back when a rustle in the bushes could mean a predator, that reflex saved lives. Today's threats are mostly emails, conversations, deadlines, and uncertainty, and the body doesn't much care about context. The brain hears a thought, what if I fail? And sometimes treats it like a roaring lion. I've had mornings where my chest tightens before coffee, where a text message sets off a cascade of scenarios. In those moments, it helps to remember, anxiety isn't weakness. It's energy misplaced. The same drive that fuels anxiety can fuel focus, creativity, and fast problem-solving, if we redirect it. So what actually helps? First, simple feedback to the body. Breathing slowly tells the nervous system you're not in mortal danger. Try lengthening your exhales, even for a minute. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. Movement does the same thing. A few brisk steps, a short set of push-ups, or even shaking out your hands can interrupt the loop and send new signals to your brain. Those small actions say, we're okay. Another habit, name the pattern without moralizing it. Saying out loud, I'm feeling anxious right now, separates you from the anxiety. It's not you, it's a process your brain is running. Grounding helps too. 5 senses, quick checklist. What can I see, hear, feel, smell, taste? It anchors thought back in the present. Retraining anxiety is gradual. Exposure works. Let yourself sit with small unknowns and notice they rarely become disasters. Rechannel the energy. Sketch, plan, tidy a corner of your room, write down the worst thing that could happen and how you'd handle it. Often, the act of outlining solutions reduces the feeling of threat. Finally, be patient and curious. When anxiety shows up, ask, what is it trying to protect me from? Can I give it a different job? The goal isn't to eliminate all anxious signal. It's to teach that not every unknown equals danger, and that feelings are data, not prophecy. Over time, those circuits can be guided toward creativity and strategy instead of constant alarm. Rainbows. Think back to the last time rain and sun collided and a ribbon of color appeared across the sky. You probably called someone over or pulled your phone out, convinced that what you were seeing was an object you could point to and share. But a rainbow isn't a thing you can touch or approach. It's a perspective. It's a pattern that only shows up because of the exact place you're standing and the exact moment the light meets the falling droplets. Here's the simple physics dressed up as a personal moment. Sunlight hits a tiny water droplet. The light bends, splits into colors inside the drop, reflects and bends again as it exits. Each color leaves the droplet at a slightly different angle. That means the red light that reaches your eye took a different path and left a different droplet than the blue light that reaches the person standing next to you. So even though you both see a semicircle of color, you are not looking at the same set of droplets. You're looking at the same phenomenon from different vantage points. That detail is quietly wild when you think about it. I love picturing two friends under the same sky, arguing about whether the red is more vivid from where they stand. They're both right, because the rainbows they're seeing are unique to their eyes. The arc isn't painted on the clouds. It's geometry made visible. Sunlight turned personal. When you move a few steps, the rainbow slides with you. When the sun lowers toward the horizon, the arc shifts higher. The rainbow is always there in potential, waiting for rain and light to meet at just the right angles. That makes rainbows stubbornly democratic and oddly intimate at the same time. They require nothing more than the right timing, a bit of alignment, and someone to witness them, which is why they feel like proof. Not of something supernatural, but of a quiet truth. Beauty depends on your position in the world. The same weather and the same sun can give two people different experiences. That has a small sting to it and a big comfort. Sting, because you can't force someone else to see the exact thing you see. Comfort, because the world is constantly offering up exclusive little shows if you're willing to stand in the right place. Think about the impulse to chase a rainbow. We run toward a vague promise of color, but you can never actually reach the end, because it moves as you move. That chase becomes a metaphor for all the things we pursue, moments that shift with our perspective. A photograph can capture a snapshot of light at one position, but it can't make someone else see the same rainbow you remember. That memory is yours, a meeting of weather, sun, and your exact place in that moment. So next time you see a rainbow, don't treat it like a postcard. Let it be a small lesson. Timing matters, alignment matters, and your point of view changes everything. Stand there a second longer, watch it slide with you, and enjoy the personal nature of that arc of color. It's the sky's way of reminding you that beauty is as much about where you are as it is about what's out there. Curiosity. Think about the last time you couldn't stop wondering about something. A plot twist, a buzzing notification, a strange noise at 2 a.m. That persistent nag in the back of your mind didn't feel purely intellectual. It felt urgent, almost physical. That's curiosity in action. It's the brain's searchlight, constantly scanning for gaps and inconsistencies built to reduce uncertainty. Personally, curiosity looks like me staying up too late to finish an episode because the cliffhanger is unbearable. It looks like pausing a conversation to quickly look up a word I don't know. Maybe for you, it's refreshing a thread to see how an argument resolves, or clicking through related videos until you realize 3 hours have passed. Those little urges are driven by dopamine. Not just the feel-good kind people talk about, but a signaling system that rewards pattern completion. Your brain is essentially saying, find the missing piece. There's a reason spoilers disappoint. When you wonder, your brain creates a kind of tension, like a rubber band being stretched. You don't get relief until the answer actually fits into the pattern you were building. If someone hands you the solution, that tying together never happens inside your head. So the physiological click, the tiny reward that comes when everything snaps into place, doesn't arrive. You end up with knowledge, but miss the satisfying resolution that curiosity craves. Every mystery, even the tiny ones, a question about a lyric, an unexplained ping, a half-remembered fact, is a small itch. Learning is the scratch. That's why following a curiosity can feel simultaneously annoying and profoundly relieving. It creates urgency, then rewards you with calm when the pattern completes. The experience is part emotional, part biochemical. That gentle release after solving a puzzle, finishing a sentence, or understanding a joke is real. It's why a single aha moment can turn a confusing afternoon into a clear, purposeful one. So what can you do with this? First, notice the tug. When something nags you, recognize it as your brain lighting up, not as an annoyance. If the question matters, let yourself follow it. Set a timer, dive in for 20 minutes, and then step back. Second, protect your opportunities for pattern completion. Avoid unnecessary spoilers when you want that internal reward, and structure learning so you actually get to assemble the pieces yourself. Finally, be kind to curiosity when it interrupts. You're literally wiring your brain to reduce uncertainty, and every scratch makes the searchlight a little sharper. That itch is normal. That relief is earned. And every time you follow curiosity thoughtfully, you're not just collecting facts, you're satisfying the brain's built-in craving for order. Sleep. That brings us to sleep. And not the boring kind of lights off, see you tomorrow. Sleep is a full-on shift change inside your head. Think of your brain as a busy office that never entirely closes. When you lie down, the day crew hands off to the night team. They don't shut the building, they reorganize it. While you rest, memories are being sorted. The moments you want to keep get filed into long-term storage, while the noisy, irrelevant stuff gets archived or tossed. That's why sometimes an answer or a name pops into your head after you've slept on it. Your brain literally moved the pieces so they made sense. At the same time, there's physical repair. Hormones that help rebuild tissue and clear metabolic waste surge during sleep. If you've ever noticed your skin looks better or you recover faster after a good night's rest, that's not coincidence. It's maintenance. Emotionally, sleep is doing something almost miraculous. The nights after a hard day are when your emotional circuits get rewired. REM sleep, the vivid, often bizarre dreaming stage, is like a rehearsal space. Dreams simulate possibilities, run scenarios, let you practice reactions without real-world consequences. You might wake up and realize a stressful conversation suddenly feels less heavy. That's not magic. It's the amygdala and prefrontal cortex recalibrating how you respond, dialing down raw reactivity and helping you approach the same situation more composed the next day. Here's a personal note. I used to call late-night scrolling me time, thinking I was decompressing. But what I was actually doing was tapping my phone while the overnight crew was trying to work. The result was mental clutter, slower thinking, and more emotional flare-ups. Sleep debt builds up the same way. It's not just feeling tired, it's leaving repairs unfinished. The laundry pile of mental and physical maintenance gets taller, decisions get harder, reactions get sharper, and your ability to enjoy life quietly erodes. So, sleep isn't escaping. You're not running away from life when you go to bed. You're rebuilding the ability to live it. Imagine waking up with clearer priorities, less reactivity, a better memory for what matters, and a body that's actually recovered from yesterday's wear and tear. That's the return on the investment. If that resonates, start treating sleep like an important meeting you can't miss. Make space for it, protect it, and recognize when you're shortchanging yourself. Small, consistent changes. A predictable bedtime, dimming lights, a quick wind down. Give the overnight crew a fighting chance to do their work. And when you respect that process, you'll notice something simple and powerful. Life feels easier to live, one well-rested morning at a time. Déjà vu. You know that tiny, startling pause when you walk into a place and, for a fraction of a second, everything looks like it's happened before? That jolt, the feeling that you're living a repeat, is déjà vu. It's dramatic in the moment. Your stomach drops. Your mind tugs at a memory that won't reveal itself, and you start hunting for clues. Was this a dream? Did I really meet this person? Did I somehow skip a beat in time? Here's the clearer, less mystical version. Déjà vu isn't time folding, it's timing misfiring. Inside your brain, there are at least two memory processes working together whenever you experience the world. One system is all about familiarity, a quick, automatic signal that says, "This feels known." The other is the context system that pieces together when, where, and how you formed that memory. In déjà vu, the familiarity signal fires first, lighting up the recognition center, but the context system hasn't caught up yet to explain why it feels familiar. The present gets tagged as something you've already lived through, even though the details that would confirm that feeling haven't arrived. Think about the last time it happened to you. Maybe you walked into a friend's apartment and for a beat you could swear you'd sat on that couch in that exact posture before. Your brain bangs the familiarity gong. We've been here, while the scene's backstory is still buffering. Because the familiarity feels so convincing and immediate, your brain fills in the gap with a story. that you dreamed it, or that this is a memory you can't quite reach. In reality, what often happened is a tiny overlap in sensory cues. A similar pattern on a rug, a light hitting a window the same way, a voice rhythm that triggers the familiarity detector out of context. Everyone gets déjà vu. It's more common when you're tired, stressed, jet-lagged, or overstimulated, times when your brain's timing is a little off. If you've ever taken an identical-looking hallway and felt weirdly transported, or had a mundane conversation suddenly feel like a rerun, that's your brain's memory circuits momentarily out of sync. For most people, it's an odd, harmless blip, a reminder that our sense of familiarity is a constructed signal, not infallible proof of a past event. Sometimes déjà vu nudges you toward curiosity. Try pausing and scanning the scene. Look for small details, color, smell, a snippet of conversation. Note whether you can connect it to a dream or a similar situation. Keeping a small mental or physical note of these moments can be oddly satisfying and even reveal what kinds of triggers your brain responds to. And if déjà vu ever becomes frequent, intense, or accompanied by other strange sensations, that's a good reason to check in with a doctor. In rare cases, it can be linked to temporal lobe activity. Most of the time, though, déjà vu is just a funny human reminder that our brain is constantly guessing, stitching together pieces of experience. It feels supernatural because the guess is so perfectly timed. For a second, your brain believes the guess, and you catch yourself in the act of being fooled by your own wiring. Next, let's look at how memory mistakes like this influence the stories we tell ourselves and why our memories can be so confidently wrong. Overthinking. Maybe you've sat in bed at 2 a.m., running the same conversation on loop. What you said, what you didn't say, all the different ways it could have gone. Or you've sat with an email and rewrote one sentence 10 times because your brain insists it can prevent a bad outcome by being perfectly precise. That's overthinking. It's your brain trying to feel safe by predicting the future. That's the key. Overthinking isn't some moral failing. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it's wired to do, searching for patterns, rehearsing scenarios, trying to turn uncertainty into a script so it doesn't feel like danger. The loop happens because uncertainty feels unsafe. The mind starts reviewing every possibility, like a security guard scanning CCTV, convinced that if it keeps watching, it will catch the threat and stop it. Here's the hard truth. Thought is a mirror, not armor. Thoughts reflect possibilities, worries, what-ifs, but they don't stop things from happening. You can't outthink chaos. You can't reason your way out of every risk, and you can't make the future obey your logic. The more you try to plan for every single outcome, the more stuck you become. The anxiety grows because the mind keeps creating ever more elaborate scenarios to protect you. So, what actually helps? The shift is simple in idea and hard in practice. Move from trying to control outcomes with thought to stepping into the uncertainty and adapting. I used to think if I could just imagine every possible interaction before it happened, I'd be ready. But the real change came when I started treating my thoughts like weather reports, useful information, not instructions. I might notice a forecast of a thunderstorm, a worst-case scenario. But that doesn't mean I have to build a storm-proof bunker. I take an umbrella, check the map, and keep walking. There are small, practical moves you can make the next time your brain starts looping. First, name the loop. I'm overthinking about the meeting. Naming takes some power away from it. Second, set a worry timer. Give your mind 5 or 10 minutes to run the scenarios, then close the tab. Third, decide on the next smallest action you can take. Send one email, make one call, or outline one point. Action breaks the loop because it shifts you from imagining to testing. Finally, practice noticing the urge to control and respond with curiosity. What would happen if I tried one small thing without knowing the outcome? Over time, those tiny experiments teach you that uncertainty is manageable. Overthinking tries to make you safe by predicting, but real safety comes from learning you can adapt. The mind will keep offering scenarios. Let it. Don't let it be the director of your life. Take a breath, pick one small step and move. That's how you build resilience, not armor. Light. Think about the last time you stood with your face tilted toward the sun or watched the blue of a clear sky fade into orange at sunset. That feeling, warm on your skin, colors suddenly richer, is the simplest, most everyday proof that light is doing something magical and weird at the same time. It's not just brightness, it's a kind of language the universe uses, and your eyes are the translators. At the smallest scale, light is both wave and particle. That sounds like a physics riddle, but you live with the answer every day. When you see ripples on a pond, picture a wave. Light behaves like that, with peaks and troughs called wavelengths. When you turn on a flashlight, imagine tiny bullets of energy, photons, hitting dust motes, reflecting off your hand and making things visible. Those photons carry energy like little packets, and they arrive in a rhythm, sometimes acting like a steady stream, sometimes like individual clicks. That duality lets light do things neither pure particles nor pure waves could do alone. Another weird but wonderful thing, light doesn't need air or wires. You can switch on a lamp and walk into the next room where there's no breeze. The photons don't care. They sail through empty space at about 300,000 kilometers per second. That number is so big it almost hurts to think about it. But it's why the sunlight from the sun gets to us in about 8 minutes, and why the light from distant stars is effectively a time machine, carrying messages from the past across vast empty distances. Every color you see is just frequency. Red is a slower beat, violet is a faster one. When your phone screen paints your face blue at night, it's mixing frequencies to create that color. When you mix paints, you're mixing pigments. When light mixes, it's mixing wavelengths. That's also why prisms split white sunlight into a rainbow. The components are always there, humming at different frequencies, waiting to be separated. And shadows? Don't think of them as mere absence. A shadow is information blocked. When a leaf casts a cool patch on the sidewalk, it tells you something precise about shape, distance, and angle. Photographers and filmmakers use shadows deliberately because they're a sculptor's tool in a flat world. They reveal texture and depth. Even in science, astronomers read shadows on moons and rings to infer size and composition of distant objects. A shadow is a story the light couldn't finish telling. Put together, this is why I like to call light the messenger of the universe. It carries data, temperature, motion, chemical fingerprints, even the outline of whole galaxies. When you look up at the night sky, those tiny points aren't just dots. They're letters in a cosmic message. Telescopes translate them into words we can understand. Your eyes do the first translation, turning patterns of photons into color, contrast, and shape. So next time you squint into a sunset or follow a beam of sunlight through dust in a room, remember, you're watching energy behave like matter and rhythm at once. You're seeing waves and particles, information and silence, all moving at an impossible speed. And because of that, you're not just an observer. You're part of a conversation the universe has been having since the first stars lit up. Memory. Memory isn't storage, it's reconstruction. Say that out loud once and let it sit. I used to think my memory was a camera roll. You point, it clicks, and the image sits there untouched. But every time I go back to a moment, I don't open a file. I recompose a scene, and that act of remembering rewrites what happened. Think of a family photo night. My sister and I will describe the same summer barbecue and end up with 2 different movies. I remember the music and the way the sun hit my father's glasses. She remembers the argument about the melted cake. Both of us swore our version was the truth. Neither of us was lying. Our brains were retelling that afternoon with slightly different casts and camera angles. That's why 2 people remember one moment differently. Why does this happen? Because recall is active. The hippocampus and other brain systems pull together bits of sight, smell, language, and feeling, then fill gaps with educated guesses, imagination wearing the costume of fact. Sometimes those guesses are helpful shortcuts. Sometimes they become part of the story. The next time you tell the story, you incorporate the version you last told, so the memory shifts again. The past isn't fixed. It's retold by the brain every time you visit it. This idea explains more than disagreements about barbecues. It explains why trauma memories can feel both impossibly sharp and foggy at the same time, why eyewitness testimony can be shaky, why nostalgia smooths the rough edges and makes some moments glow. It makes room for compassion. If someone remembers a shared moment differently, they aren't trying to erase you. Their brain is simply reconstructing a scene from its own pieces. What can you do with that? First, give yourself permission to be wrong about the details. Being mistaken about what happened doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. Second, when accuracy matters, in work, in relationships, or in safety, create external records, photos, journals, timestamps. Those anchors don't stop reconstruction, but they help check it. Third, use this childhood scratchpad quality of memory as a tool. When you revisit painful times, you actually have the capacity to reshape them a little, to put new meaning into what once felt fixed. So the next time you find yourself in a heated, "but I remember it like this" exchange, try pausing and saying, "Tell me what you see." You'll hear a different edit of the same movie, and you might just see how beautifully unreliable and quietly creative our minds really are. Transition to next section. Fire. Fire is chemistry set free. Oxygen meeting carbon so violently that light appears. Think about that for a second. What we call a flame isn't a thing you hold. It's a conversation between atoms. Oxygen reaches for carbon, bonds break and remake, and the byproduct is heat and light. It's not an object, but a reaction, consuming fuel until the system can finally settle back toward equilibrium. Every flame is, literally, atoms rearranging, energy remembering how to escape. That sounds clinical until you've held your hands over a campfire on a cold night, watched the way the flames lick around a log, and felt that small, ego-shrinking sense of being both warmed and watched. For me, fire has always had this double life. There's the intimate, the tea kettle hissing on the stove, the candle I light when I need to focus, the toast browning into something comforting. And there's the enormous, wildfires on the news, stories of houses lost, the ancient human fear of being burned. The same chemistry underlies both. If you slow down and look at a flame, you can almost read its mood. Blue means things are efficient. The fuel and oxygen are well matched. The combustion is clean, less soot, more heat. Yellow and orange come when tiny carbon particles glow as they rise, a smoky, softer light. The flicker and the color tell you about how the reaction is going, how much fuel, how much oxygen, how quickly the energy is leaving the system. It's as if the flame is speaking in a language of color and motion. We harness that language from infancy. Fire cooks our food, purifies water, hardens metal, sculpts glass. A chef coaxing a sauce, a blacksmith hammering red-hot steel, a parent lighting a birthday candle. All of these are negotiations with that same reaction. Creation and destruction are braided together. The bread that rises and browns in an oven only because heat breaks and reforms molecular structures. The pottery that becomes permanent after being subjected to intense flame. Fire builds culture as much as it destroys it, but the warning is always there. Fire doesn't distinguish, it follows thermodynamics and chemistry without mercy. A spark in dry brush, a neglected candle, a stalled car battery, the same principle turned toward harm. That's why respect matters. Knowing how a flame behaves, how it needs fuel and oxygen, how containment or ventilation changes everything, is a kind of practical empathy with nature's rules. It lets us invite fire in safely and recognize when we've crossed the line. Maybe the most human part of fire is the stories we attach to it. Around a bonfire, we swap memories, songs, confessions. We use flame to mark time, a candle for a birthday, a candle for mourning. There's comfort in the predictability of a controlled blaze and terror in its unpredictability when it runs free. So when you see a flicker next time, remember, you're watching chemistry that has learned to be visible. It's a reminder that energy moves, that matter rearranges, and that our lives depend on learning to work with the laws that make both warmth and warning possible. Wi-Fi. Think about the last time you grabbed your phone to pull up directions, answer a video call, or dim the lights from the couch. Nothing physically connects your device to the router, yet instantly, a song fills the room. Someone's face appears on screen. The bulbs shift from warm to cool. What makes that magic possible is a traffic of invisible light humming through the air. Imagine the room as a dark theater and the router and your devices as invisible lighthouses. They don't beam colors you can see. Instead, they pulse with microwaves. Little flashes of electromagnetic energy that behave like light but at a frequency your eyes don't notice. Those pulses bounce off walls, furniture, even the dust motes floating in the beam. Every surface becomes a mirror, every air molecule a tiny scatterer. The waves crisscross the room in a constant, restless choreography, tracing paths you can't follow. Underneath that dance is something a bit more mathematical. Wi-Fi turns strings of ones and zeros into patterns of electromagnetic waves. Think of binary-like sheet music and the radio waves as the instruments. A stream of numbers, 011 becomes changes in the radio signal's strength, timing, or phase. On the receiving end, your phone listens to those subtle variations and reassembles the numbers back into music, video, or a message. In other words, numbers are translated into sound, into color, into motion. A pixel's hue on your screen started life as a tiny packet of code riding an invisible wave. Your friend's laugh was once a sequence of bits that the air carried to your ear. Because the waves reflect and overlap, the signal arriving at a device is often a jumbled chorus of echoes. Modern Wi-Fi hardware doesn't get confused. It uses clever tricks like multiple antennas and algorithms to untangle the echoes into the original message, almost like picking out a single voice in a crowded room. That's why routers with more antennas can feel faster and more reliable. They're better at listening to multiple versions of the same whisper and stitching them together. Make it personal. Maybe you've been on a late-night video call where someone's face freezes for a beat and then snaps back to life. That pause was the room briefly misplacing a handful of bits as they bounced between your walls. Or think of how a smart bulb changes color when you tell the app to sunset orange. A tiny command packet zipped invisibly through the air, translated into electricity that changes the filament's output. You can't see any of this. We're surrounded by a storm of logic, silent and precise, a cloud of invisible light translating raw numbers into the sounds, colors, and movements that shape our everyday lives. It's easy to forget that every tap, swipe, and spoken command sets off a tiny electromagnetic ballet happening right now, all around you. Aging. Aging is entropy expressed in flesh. That line sounds clinical, but it's also strangely intimate. Think about the last time you ran a hand over your own face or noticed a parent's hair going silver in a single afternoon. Those marks aren't just wear and tear. They're the record of a life lived, the leftover ledger of tiny mistakes cells make every time they copy themselves. Our bodies are, in a way, memory machines. Every cell carries a history. The pattern of past infections, the scars of sun and smoke, the muscle built in a season of hard work, the laugh lines earned through years of smiling. But unlike the files on your phone, biological memory wears down the medium itself. DNA replication is magnificent and messy. Each division introduces a sliver of error. Over decades, those slivers add up. Telomeres shorten, proteins misfold, tissues lose some of their pristine elasticity. Time collects the errors like a slow, patient librarian misplacing one book at a time. That doesn't mean aging is only decline. I remember watching my grandmother peel an orange at 92, slow, deliberate fingers that still knew the exact motion. Her hands told a story. Raised in wartime, raised children by the dozen, stitched countless hems. There were liver spots and a tremor from years of arthritis, but there was also expertise and memory written into muscle and bone. Aging is accumulation. It's survival, recorded in wrinkles and a changed gait, in the way someone pauses longer to find the right word because they have more words to choose from. You can see the same principle in small, everyday things. A scar on your knee from when you were 7 doesn't just mark the injury, it marks the choice to keep running after you fell. A line at the corner of your eye might be the souvenir of 1,000 jokes shared at kitchen tables. Slowed rhythm isn't just a concession to diminishing energy. Often, it's the sensible tempo someone adopts after learning where rushing costs them. These are functional signatures of life, not merely evidence of loss. Scientifically, there are many threads: accumulated DNA damage, epigenetic changes that flip switches on and off, chronic inflammation whispering at tissues for decades. But don't let the science strip the humanity from the picture. The biological mechanisms are real, but their expression is personal. Aging shapes character the way weather shapes a landscape. Softening hills, deeper valleys, signs of a storm weathered, fields cultivated, stories planted. So how do we live with that accumulation? With curiosity, with care, with the humility to accept that some things fray, and the courage to steward what remains. Aging asks for different strategies: better sleep, gentler movement, nourishment that repairs rather than insults. It asks for a cultural shift, too, to read aging not as mere decay, but as a visible archive of experience. When you next see those lines in the mirror or feel your steps lengthen, try to listen. Those marks are not just the past, they're evidence of presence. They're the body's version of a life remembered, imperfect, resilient, and utterly human. Empathy. Empathy, at its core, is simulation. It's not magic or mysticism. It's a biological trick our brains learned to do so we would survive together. Remember the last time you saw someone stumble on the sidewalk and your stomach dropped for a second? Or when a friend starts to cry and you feel your chest tighten like you're the one carrying the weight? That's your brain running a quiet rehearsal of someone else's experience. Neuroscientists point to mirror neurons as the wiring behind that rehearsal. These are the brain cells that fire both when you do something and when you watch someone else do it. They're the reason we flinch when we watch a movie character get hurt, or grin when a baby laughs across the room. In other words, your nervous system is literally modeling another person's state, feeling a version of their pain, joy, or fear as if it were happening to you. Why would evolution give us a feature that makes us suffer when others suffer? Because it was useful. Empathy evolved to bond tribes and raise children. If a parent instinctively mirrored an infant's distress, they were more likely to respond, feed, warm, and protect. If group members resonated with one another's needs, cooperation and trust followed. This capacity for emotional attunement knits small human groups into functioning communities. But there's a flip side. That same ability to tune into other people's feelings means we also pick up feelings that aren't ours to carry. Have you ever left a hospital visit exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion, or found yourself weepy after scrolling through a stream of difficult news? That's empathy's cost, absorbing emotion that isn't yours. It can lead to burnout, anxiety, and a distorted sense of where your feelings end and someone else's begin. Think about standing in a crowded room where someone suddenly starts to panic. Even if you know rationally that the danger isn't for you, your breath shortens, your muscles tighten. That's the price of shared humanity, a vulnerability to the emotional weather around you. But it's also what makes human connection possible. Call it the emotional Wi-Fi connecting every nervous system. Without it, We'd be islands, indifferent to the needs that keep societies alive. I still remember sitting with a friend after she lost someone close. I hadn't lived her life, didn't know the person she missed, but I found myself crying alongside her. Not because of the details, but because my brain refused to leave her grief isolated. It hurt. It also mattered. That moment of shared sorrow made it easier for her to breathe, to talk, to feel less alone. So empathy is both gift and burden, a powerful simulation that lets us feel together, care together, and sometimes hurt together. Recognizing it for what it is, an automatic biological process that can be managed, gives us a chance to protect ourselves without shutting others out. Sound. Slide your hand through the air and you don't feel much, but that nothing is busy. Sound is vibration traveling through matter. Imagine the tiny nudges. A voice sets one air molecule moving, it bumps the next, and that bump becomes a ripple that moves outward. Those ripples reach your ear as pressure changes, and inside your inner ear, delicate hair cells translate motion into electrical signals your brain passes as meaning. That mechanical chain feels almost magical the first time you think about it, and strangely intimate when you picture it happening inside you every minute of the day. Think about a morning when you wake up before the world is fully awake. The house breathes in soft mechanical sighs, a radiator clinking, the refrigerator's low, patient hum. And for a moment, those sounds make the house feel alive. We often mistake silence for absence, but it's not. Silence is a balance where competing vibrations cancel, or where our attention reduces the noise to the point that subtle textures emerge. In that quiet, you start to hear the things you never meant to notice, the whisper of pages turning, the distant car on the highway, your own breath moving in and out. Those are not intrusions. They're the raw material of presence. I remember lying on my back in the grass as a kid, looking up through a net of leaves. The wind gave the trees a slow, patient rhythm, and somewhere a dog barked like punctuation. I could feel the buzz of a power line in my teeth. A silly, startling sensation that taught me early on that everything hums. Stone does too. If you put your ear to a cool flagstone, you'll catch a faint, persistent sound. The world's tiny motions, water moving under concrete, distant traffic turned into a subterranean pulse. It's a reminder that existence itself carries vibration. Our ears are stubbornly democratic. They accept almost every sound, and then our brains decide what to keep. A crying baby in a cafe becomes the main event for the parent and background texture for everyone else. That filter is how we build meaning. When you're composing a scene, planning a podcast, or just trying to be present with someone, think about which vibrations you're inviting into attention and which you want to let fall away. Silence as balance also means the absence people often crave isn't a vacuum, but a canvas. It's where subtle resonances, a friend's sigh, the creak of a chair, the rhythm of footsteps, become meaningful. Try a small experiment. Sit somewhere you usually ignore, close your eyes for a minute and listen. Name 3 sounds by their texture rather than their source. Something metallic, something pulsing, something soft. This simple reframe pulls you out of categorization and back into sensation. Sound is both physics and memory. A single note can fold you back into a room, a person, a feeling. Knowing that each tone began as a tiny molecular argument makes that fold feel richer, not less. Everything hums, even the stillest things. And when we listen without filling the space with labels, we discover a surprising map of life's small, continuous conversations. Confidence. Confidence isn't some flashy bet that you'll win every time. It's simpler and stranger. It's knowing you'll survive when you don't. I learned that the hard way, not from an inspirational quote, but from a string of messy human experiences. Once I gave a talk where the projector died, my notes fell in the wrong order, and I walked off feeling like I'd failed at something that mattered. The weird thing is that the aftermath taught me more than any successful performance ever did. I didn't hallucinate instant mastery. I catalogued what went wrong, fixed the things I could, and kept showing up. That slow, unglamorous work is what built a steadiness inside me that didn't depend on applause. Self-trust comes from that steady accumulation of lived evidence, not from ego-driven bravado. When people talk about confidence as a feeling, they often mean the adrenaline rush you get before a win. But the confidence that sticks is different. It's the quiet voice that says, "I can handle the fallout." That voice is born in the small places where you survived discomfort and then moved on. The body remembers those endings. Your heart rate spikes, you hyperventilate, you think it's the end. Then hours or days later, you're okay. Your nervous system files that as experience, and the mind borrows the file and calls it confidence. This matters because it changes the way you take risks. If your baseline is survival, you don't need to appear flawless. You can take practical risks, knowing the worst outcome won't destroy you. That doesn't mean courting failure. It means reframing setbacks as data, not doom. Failures stop being identity statements and become feedback loops. Here are a few practical ways I learned to encourage that embodied confidence. First, keep a survival ledger. A short list where you jot down moments you thought you couldn't cope but did. On rough days, reading that list helps the nervous system remember it's survived before. Second, build micro-exposures. Volunteer to speak for 5 minutes. Email someone without perfect phrasing. Try a new recipe and accept the burn on the first attempt. Each tiny mismatch between fear and result adds concrete evidence to your ledger. Third, attend to the body. Simple breathing, slow out breaths, grounding in your feet, opening your chest. Signals to your nervous system that the crisis phase is over. Over time, those physical cues pair with past endurance and the mind learns a new shorthand. I can survive. Fourth, reframe your internal script. Replace "I must not fail" with "If this doesn't work, I'll learn and adapt." Language matters. It trains your brain toward resilience. Real confidence is quieter than bravado, but far stronger. It doesn't shout that you'll win. It knows you'll be all right if you don't. That kind of steadiness comes from experience, from the body remembering, and from a mind that trusts those memories. Practice it like a muscle. Expose, record, breathe, reframe, and step forward with a steadier, truer kind of confidence. Algorithms. Next, let's talk about algorithms. Those invisible decision trees quietly shaping your world. Think about the last time you opened an app and found exactly what you didn't know you wanted. Maybe you scrolled through videos and ended up 3 hours later watching a niche hobby clip you never knew existed. Maybe you searched for a pair of shoes and now your feed thinks you plan to redecorate your entire life. That feeling like something or someone gets you. It's not empathy. It's pattern repetition. Algorithms don't understand you the way a friend does. They can't feel, imagine, or care. What they do is recognize statistical patterns. Clicks, watch times, purchases, shares, repeats. Every action you take is a data point that nudges the decision tree. The next branch you see is the branch that maximizes whatever goal the platform set: engagement, ad clicks, retention. The convenience feels personal, but it's mathematics in disguise. Let me make it relatable. When I started watching one cooking video, the app fed me more. Similar recipes, then utensils, then sponsored grocery deals. It was helpful. I learned a new technique and saved time. But the algorithm also narrowed my menu. For days I saw variations on the same cuisine, less of the news I used to skim, and almost no long-form documentaries. That helpful convenience came with a subtle trade-off. My feed became a mirror of my recent behavior, not a window to wider options. Because these systems are tuned to patterns, they create feedback loops. If you click sensational headlines, you'll see more of them. If you linger on emotional posts, the algorithm learns that emotion equals engagement. Over time, that shapes what you think is normal, interesting, or true. It's how niche ideas can suddenly feel mainstream. It's how a few interactions can steer your attention in big ways. There's also a mistaken sense of identity. Platforms treat you as a bundle of probabilities. They don't care about your full story. They optimize for whatever action is likely next. That's why two people with similar demographics might still see very different feeds. Their tiny differences in behavior send them down different branches. The result is a personal stream that's mathematically precise but humanly incomplete. So what can you do? Small habits change the patterns these trees learn. Intentionally click on things outside your usual bubble. Subscribe to a handful of sources you disagree with. Use the not interested options when recommendations miss the mark. And remember the simple rule. Convenience is a design choice, not a kindness. When something feels too perfectly tailored, ask who benefits, you or the system that wants you to stay. Now that we've unraveled how algorithms steer what you see, we'll move on to how that data gets used and what it means for your privacy. Taste. Taste is chemistry meeting electricity. Tiny receptors on your tongue are like little outposts, translating molecules into the language your brain understands. Flavor signals. When you sip coffee, take a bite of grapefruit, or bite into a warm bowl of broth, chemicals from the food dissolve into saliva, bump into those receptors, and trigger tiny electrical changes that travel as messages up your nerves. There are 5 basic signals those receptors reliably send: sweet, salty, bitter, sour, and umami. Each one is like an old survival memo. Sweet historically meant calories and quick energy, ripe fruit that fed our ancestors. Salty pointed to essential minerals. Our bodies need salt for nerves and cells to work. Bitter was the danger flag. Many plant toxins taste bitter, so that sensation helped people avoid poison. Sour often meant acidity or spoilage, a cue that something might be off. Umami, that savory depth in meat, cheese, and broths, signals protein and amino acids, nourishing building blocks. I still remember the first time I really noticed how literal this felt. A lemon so sharp it made my eyes water. My face scrunched instinctively. My body was reacting before I had words for it. Or how a single spoonful of my grandmother's chicken broth could feel like a rescue, the umami wrapping around me like a blanket. Those reactions are both ancient wiring and deeply personal memory. On the microscopic level, different receptor types do their jobs in different ways. Some are like locks that need a specific chemical key. That's how sweet and umami work with special receptors. Others, like salty and sour, change the electrical charge directly, opening channels in the cell membrane. When a receptor cell is activated, it sends a quick electrical burst down the gustatory nerve to brain regions that process taste, link it to smell, memory, and emotion, and decide whether to swallow, spit out, or reach for another bite. Today, though, our modern food landscape has learned to speak this language fluently. Food designers layer sweetness, saltiness, and umami to hit those receptors in ways that can hijack our cravings. That's why one chip becomes a bag and one spoonful becomes a whole carton. These signals tap into reward systems that pair flavor with pleasure and comfort. And taste isn't just biology, it's social. Childhood meals, cultural staples, and the comfort foods you turn to when stressed all shape what you prefer. Some people are genetically more sensitive to bitter, super tasters, who find broccoli unbearably strong, while others barely notice certain flavors. But the core is the same. Taste was once a survival guide, and now it's a guide to what we crave, carrying with it our body's needs, our memories, and the modern push and pull of convenience and design. Magnetism. Think of magnetism as motion made invisible. You can't see the dance, but you feel its tug. At the heart of it are electrons, tiny charged particles that not only orbit atoms, but also spin. When a group of those spins lock into sync, they stop behaving like a crowd of individual people and start behaving like a single, coordinated choir. That coordinated spin is what gives rise to a magnetic field, an invisible region around the material where forces can push or pull without anything ever touching. Picture two small magnets on your fridge. One clicks into place, the other snaps away. You feel attraction and repulsion, but there's never any physical connection. What's happening is a silent negotiation between particles. Each electron decides whether to align with its neighbor or oppose it. If more of them align, their individual tiny fields add up and the whole thing becomes a recognizable magnet. If they oppose, the effects cancel and the material stays unmagnetic. This is surprisingly personal. You've probably experienced magnetism without naming it. That satisfying snap when a fridge magnet finds its place, the eerie way two magnetized ends refuse to meet, or the way a compass needle obediently points north even when you're lost on a hike. I remember playing with a compass as a kid, watching that tiny needle hold steady no matter how I turned the paper map beneath it. That steadiness is the Earth doing its job, the whole planet acting like one huge magnet, keeping our compasses honest. Earth's magnetism isn't just a party trick for hikers. Its magnetic field is a shield that deflects charged particles from the sun, sculpting the auroras and protecting our atmosphere. Imagine the planet wearing an invisible helmet, pushing away a constant stream of solar wind. Without that field, life on the surface would face very different conditions. Back in our daily lives, magnetism sneaks into so many technologies. The speakers in your headphones rely on magnets to convert electrical signals into motion. The field does the pulling and pushing that makes a cone vibrate and create sound. Hard drives and credit card stripes use magnetic properties to store information, and MRI machines use powerful magnetic fields to image what's inside your body without a single incision. Even maglev trains float above their tracks using magnetic repulsion, cutting friction and making travel eerily smooth. A useful way to think about magnetic fields is to imagine invisible lines flowing from one pole to the other, north to south. They show the direction a tiny compass would point and explain why opposite poles attract, while like poles repel. It's a simple rule, but underneath it sits a chaotic micro-world where particles are constantly choosing whether to line up or stand their ground. So next time you snap a magnet onto a fridge, hold a compass, or tap on a speaker, take a moment to appreciate that invisible motion. Magnetism is the choreography of the tiny, a silent negotiation that turns countless microscopic spins into forces you can feel and use. Love. If the first spark feels like fireworks, love is the quiet after the show that rearranges your furniture. It starts in chemistry. Oxytocin released when you hold hands, when foreheads touch, when morning coffee arrives at the bedside, but it doesn't stop there. Oxytocin is the part that builds bridges. It narrows the distance, makes your nervous system lean towards someone else. Dopamine is the part that makes you chase them, the thrill when a text lights up your screen, the small high that comes from eye contact across a crowded room. Habit is the part that turns those highs into a map. The way your day now has a predictable stop at their laugh. Their name becomes a route you follow without thinking. Think about a relationship you've had, maybe one that still lives in your head. Remember the early obsession, the planning, the replaying of conversations. That was dopamine shaping pathways, rewarding you for seeking closeness. Fast forward a year, you notice yourself craving their presence less like a spike and more like a shore where you can wash up. That's oxytocin and habit co-writing new neural grooves. Your brain learns to find safety in another body. Home becomes a person, not just a place. This is why touch matters more than lines in a love poem. A hug after a long day recalibrates your stress systems. It literally reduces cortisol. A hand on your back during a restaurant check-in calms your fight or flight. Those small physical rituals don't feel flashy, but they are doing the heavy lifting, teaching your nervous system that threat is lower, that togetherness equals steadiness. And yes, love looks poetic, because language tries to catch what chemistry does in silence. You call it butterflies, soulmate, falling, and the brain smiles at the metaphors because they echo real processes. Your brain is a storyteller too, making meaning out of patterns. The logic of daily routine looks suspiciously like longing when those routines are wrapped around someone else's laugh. It's also messy. Chemistry can make you blind to red flags, and habit can keep you in a comfort that is no longer nourishing. Recognizing the biology helps, though. It gives you a lens to see when desire is addiction, when comfort is complacency, when attachment is healthy support. Once you know what's happening under the surface, you can choose rituals that deepen care rather than erase boundaries. A check-in that's curious instead of accusatory, a goodbye kiss that's intentional, an agreed-upon rhythm for difficult conversations. So next time you wonder why you feel anchored to one person, remember it's not magic or madness. It's oxytocin building safety, dopamine writing desire into circuits, and habit teaching your brain where home is. Chemistry, yes, written like poetry. Logic, yes, disguised as longing. And like any good poem, it asks you to read it slowly. Procrastination. Procrastination isn't about being weak or undisciplined. It's your nervous system doing its job, trying to keep you comfortable by convincing you the work can wait. Think about the last time you told yourself, "I'll start in an hour," and then ended up watching 3 videos. That tiny voice isn't laziness. It's a protection plan. When a task risks failure, judgment, or change, your brain puts a bright red flag on it and labels it a threat. Distraction suddenly feels like relief because scrolling or busy work soothes that alarm. I've fallen for this trick more times than I care to admit. Before an important email or a presentation, I'll reorganize files like my inbox is a safe place to hide. That avoidance isn't moral failure, it's ego preservation. If I delay and the task doesn't get done, my self-image stays intact. I didn't try, so I didn't fail. Harsh, maybe, but understanding this flip of the brain changes everything. So if motivation isn't the problem, what is? The fix is gentleness, not pep talks, not willpower boot camps. Gentleness looks like acknowledging the fear and lowering the stakes. Instead of shouting at yourself to do more, say, "I notice I'm avoiding this, that's okay." Naming the feeling takes power away from it. Your amygdala loves being noticed. Once you label the threat, it becomes more manageable. Try simple, concrete moves you can actually feel working. Tell yourself you'll do 2 minutes. 2 minutes is small enough your nervous system won't declare a crisis. Often those 2 minutes stretch into 30. If they don't, you still won. You practiced sitting with discomfort and learned something about your pattern. Another tool, schedule a practice session where the goal isn't to finish but to learn. Make it experimental. I'll try this approach for 20 minutes and see what happens. That removes performance pressure. Pair work with a tiny ritual, a deep breath, a glass of water, a 5-second stretch to signal safety to your body. When distraction wins, don't punish yourself. Pause and ask, what am I protecting? Write down the fear. It might be, I'll look foolish, or this will take forever. Then imagine the worst realistic outcome and plan one small response to it. That deflates the catastrophic thinking that fuels procrastination. Finally, celebrate attempts, not just results. Reward the act of starting with something small, a walk, a coffee, 5 minutes of your favorite playlist. Over time, your nervous system learns starting equals survival, not danger. Procrastination won't vanish overnight, but with gentleness, curiosity, tiny starts, and plans for the worst case, you'll begin to reclaim your time without beating yourself up. Butterflies in the stomach. You know that sudden hollow feeling right before you speak up or meet someone who matters? That fluttering in your belly isn't poetic, it's physiological. Adrenaline tells the gut to stand by for fight or flight. Blood leaves the stomach, muscles prime, and the emptiness feels like a flutter. That physical shorthand, butterflies in the stomach, is your body reallocating resources from digestion to readiness. Picture it. You're waiting at a coffee shop, phone buzzing with a message that could change everything, or you're moments away from stepping on stage. Your hands get a little clammy, your heart speeds up, your mouth goes dry, and your stomach feels like it's doing a cheer routine. That's not some mystical sign of destiny. It's your sympathetic nervous system doing its job. When adrenaline floods the system, blood is rerouted toward the big muscles in your legs and arms so you can run, fight, or perform. The gut, being non-essential for that split-second survival priority, gets temporarily deprioritized, hence the hollow, fluttering sensation. It's easy to interpret that flutter as weakness or to panic because it feels out of your control. But here's the kicker. The same system that prepares you for danger also prepares you for love. Romantic attraction, high-stakes conversations, auditions, even big presentations are all emotionally charged situations. Your brain tags them as important, sometimes high stakes, and triggers that ancient ready or run response. So whether you're facing a wild animal or a first kiss, your physiology reacts in much the same way. That understanding can be strangely empowering. Instead of telling yourself you're too nervous, you can reframe it. Your body is simply saying this moment matters. Tiny shifts help too. When you slow your breath, you activate the parasympathetic system, the rest and digest counterbalance, which gently brings blood flow back to your stomach and calms the flutter. Naming the sensation out loud, "I'm feeling nervous, but that means this matters," reduces its intensity. Grounding techniques, feet on the floor, feeling the chair beneath you, sipping water, remind your body there's no tiger in front of you. So next time those butterflies arrive, don't fight them as enemies. Recognize them as messengers. They're awkward, uncomfortable, and human, but they're also proof that you care. Use that energy instead of shrinking from it. Smile, breathe, and step into the moment those butterflies are trying to ready you for. Consciousness. Consciousness is awareness aware of itself. Say that out loud, and it lands weirdly. Not just being awake, but the part of you that notices you are awake. It's the inner voice that narrates a walk down the street, the small chorus that says, "I'm cold," before you zip your jacket, the pause that watches a memory and thinks, "That was me." That reflex of self-recognition, that loop that can point back at itself, is what we mean when we talk about consciousness. On a practical level, it feels immediate and obvious. You felt it when you looked in the mirror and recognized your face, when you caught yourself daydreaming, or when you suddenly realized you'd been on autopilot. Those moments are powered by something very physical. Billions of neurons, each a tiny electrical and chemical machine firing in dizzyingly complex patterns. Networks light up, rhythms synchronize, signals flow through circuits shaped by your life experiences. When those patterns are dense and integrated enough, they create the sense of an I sitting behind your thoughts. The internal narrator that lines up memories, sensations, intentions, and gives them a voice. Neuroscience can map those patterns. We can see which brain regions correlate with self-reflection, how information flows during decision-making, how damage to specific areas changes the feeling of self. Functional MRI gives us pictures of activity. Careful experiments reveal causal roles. That's the beautiful part. Science is steadily illuminating the machinery. We can point to processes and say, there's the network that constructs your sense of body. There's the timing that stitches experiences into a continuous stream. And yet, there's the spark, the hard part that resists explanation. You can describe all the wiring, the spikes, the neurotransmitters, and still ask, why does any of that feel like something from the inside? Why is there something it is like to taste coffee, to feel grief, to be you? That subjective quality, the first-person feel, is what philosophers call qualia, and it stubbornly sits outside a complete mechanistic account. Science tells us the how, it's less clear about the why of experience. That tension is oddly poetic. When we say consciousness is the universe watching itself think, we're not being mystical so much as pointing at a profound fact. The same matter and energy that makes stars and soil also assemble into patterns that can reflect on themselves. Sitting in your chair reading these words, you are a tiny aperture through which the cosmos becomes self-aware. That idea makes ordinary moments feel enormous. The idle thought in the shower becomes a sliver of the universe doing what it does best, becoming aware. So what do you carry from that? Maybe it's humility, recognizing the mystery inside what seems most familiar. Maybe it's wonder, a tiny daily ritual of noticing that your noticing is real. Either way, consciousness is both an astonishing biological feat and a philosophical puzzle, and living with that double view, part mechanistic, part marvel, changes how we look at ourselves and at each other. DNA, 4 letters, A, T, C, and G, repeat in endless variations to build every living thing. Say it out loud and it almost sounds like alphabet soup, but this alphabet is different. It's a language made of chemistry. Those letters are actually molecules that pair up and stack inside a spiral staircase we call the double helix, and together they spell instructions that run your cells. Think of your body as a city and DNA as the set of blueprints tucked inside every building permit. Those blueprints aren't vague ideas. They're precise instructions for how to make proteins, how to fix a cut, how to digest a sandwich, how to cough when you swallow something wrong. In my family, for example, we joke about the stubborn curl in my sister's hair. That curl is a sentence in our DNA that got repeated through generations. It's also why my grandfather, even at 80, could still smell the rain before anyone else. A tiny sensory instruction left untouched for decades. What's wild is how ancient some of these instructions are. DNA stores blueprints older than memory, fragments of code that have been passed down, edited, and preserved since before humans existed. There are stretches in your genome that are shared with frogs, fruit flies, even yeast. That continuity makes each of us part of a story that stretches back billions of years. Not just through family trees, but through life itself. And yet, DNA isn't frozen. It edits those blueprints in silence every time a cell divides. Imagine photocopying a 1,000-page manual millions of times. Sometimes the copier smudges a letter, sometimes it skips a line. Those tiny changes, mutations, can be harmless. They can be the reason a population adapts to a new environment, or they can cause disease. Most of the time, our cells catch and fix errors with an efficiency that would make any proofreader jealous. But occasionally, a change slips through, and that slip can be the beginning of something new. That combination, ancient instruction and continual, silent edit, is what makes DNA feel so personal. It's in the freckle you trace on your arm, the way you metabolize coffee, the risk factors you and your siblings share. It explains why your baby picture looks like your mother's and why you might laugh at the same joke as your cousin. And it's why science can read those letters to learn about ancestors, diseases, and even how to design better medicines. So when I say DNA is a language made of chemistry, I mean it in the most literal and human way. It writes who we are, remembers where we came from, and quietly rewrites itself every time life keeps going, in every heartbeat and every breath. Fireflies. On a humid summer night, I stand at the edge of a field, and the darkness is not empty. It is full of tiny lanterns. They blink in patterns that look improvised, but when you watch, a strange order appears. A ripple of light moves through the trees, like someone running a finger along a string of tiny bulbs. Scientists call it synchronous flashing, but what I feel is the exact opposite of a lab note. It feels like an answer. Each flash is a short, urgent sentence. Male meets female, female answers, timing perfect enough to find a partner in the dark. The rhythm is species-specific, a code shaped by evolution, but its effect is immediate. When lights align, something human in me relaxes. It feels like witnessing a conversation where everyone agrees on the punctuation. Small pauses, tiny emphases, the way a single synchronized beat makes the whole place hush. I remember holding my partner's hand once, both of us quiet, and counting flashes together like a private Morse code. We felt less alone. It's ridiculous and beautiful at the same time. These beetles have turned a dark corner into a cathedral. And if you know someone, you can send them here in your mind. Bring them down the path, past the smell of cut grass, to the place where the lights begin. You can watch families, strangers, teenagers, old people. Everyone slows. Phones put away not to capture, but to be captured by the moment. And that's what makes the sight feel intimate. Light used not as signal to the world, but as a tiny promise between creatures and between us and what surrounds us. The science and the poetry live in the same frame. Genes tune a flash, neurons time a delay, physics determines brightness, yet the result feels like music. It reminds me that complex systems can create beauty without anyone intending it, and that we too can find rhythm together if we pay attention. Sometimes I try to imagine the world from the firefly's point of view. Their world is small and immediate. A blade of grass, a neighboring tree, the sweep of air from a passing dog. Light is their language and the night their huge open room. Watching them, I feel both small and included, tiny in the universe but part of a chorus. The flashes remind me that communication doesn't need words to be meaningful. If you ever feel like your words are failing, when you don't know how to say, "I'm here," or "I care," think of these tiny lights. Sometimes timing and presence are the message, so next time you see that soft pulse, don't rush to explain it. Stand there for a moment, sink your breath to the pattern, and let the forest's light remind you that connection can be as simple and stubborn as a pulse. And in that steady blinking, I find a quiet hope, small, persistent, and utterly alive. It teaches me patience, to wait, to notice, and to answer when I can. Good night. Reflection. When you stand in front of a mirror, what you see isn't just a surface returning light. It's a moment folded back to you. That's the thing I love to remind myself when I catch my own face in a window on a rainy day or in the chrome of a coffee pot. Reflection isn't light bouncing. It's memory returning. Think of each photon as a little courier. It leaves the world, runs into a surface, then turns and comes back carrying everything it touched. Color, texture, temperature, a hint of the angle it met you at. The mirror doesn't invent the scene. It hands it back, stamped with the past of the light itself. I remember once looking at an old photograph, the kind where the edges had faded and the ink smelled faintly of attic dust. I held it up in a bright window and watched the light wash over the faces. For a moment, those people were alive again. Not because the image changed, but because the light that met it was carrying the room, the afternoon, and the way I was thinking when I looked at them. That's what I mean by time turned outward. Mirrors don't only show us what's in front of them, they show the journey of how that thing met the world. This matters because reflection is familial to memory. We do this with people and moments. We glance back and return with information. When someone tells you a story about a shared trip, the details they bring back are like photons, not random, but colored by what their eyes and heart encountered. Sometimes the return is clear and faithful. Other times it's distorted by stains, scratches, the way the surface catches the light. A mirror smudged with fingerprints throws a different image than a flawless pane, and a memory clouded by anger or love reads differently too. On hard days, I treat reflective surfaces like old friends. I'll look at a street puddle and honestly ask, "What did you see?" It's a small ritual, a way to remind myself that what I'm seeing now has a history. I don't expect perfect truth. I expect a trace, an honest attempt by light to remember. That shift, from demanding absolute answers to honoring the return, is freeing. It lets you accept that your reflection and the memories it stirs are both accurate and filtered. They tell you where you were, not just where you are. So next time you catch your face in glass or you listen to someone recall the past, treat it like photons coming back with stories. Ask what they carried, and remember that remembering is an act of return, of time folded into an instant handed back to you. Music. Think about the last song that stopped you in your tracks. Maybe it was a chorus you couldn't get out of your head, a line that made your chest tighten, or a melody that dragged you back to a summer afternoon or a person you once loved. That pull isn't magic, it's physics and pattern working together. Music is mathematics that learned to feel. At its core, a note is just a vibration, air pushed and pulled at a certain speed. When two or more vibrations meet at precise ratios, they lock into something our ears call harmony. A perfect fifth, an octave, the thirds that make a chord sound major or minor. These are all relationships you could write as fractions on a page. But what looks like dry numbers on paper becomes immediate and alive the moment it reaches your ear. Your brain does the heavy lifting. Those pressure waves hit your eardrum, get translated into electrical signals, and then your auditory system begins recognizing patterns, repeating beats, rising lines, expectant pauses. Predictability plus surprise is where the emotional payoff lives. When a melody resolves in the way your brain anticipated, you feel relief or satisfaction. When a chord bends away from expectation, you feel tension, a tiny, thrilling discomfort that begs for resolution. Over time, these pattern recognition circuits learn what a particular style or song typically does, so even a single broken expectation can trigger goosebumps. That's why a song can make you laugh, cry, or float into daydreams. The brain converts pressure waves into patterns of joy, sadness, or nostalgia. A minor key might line up with memories of loss and create a tender ache. A rhythmic groove that syncs with your own heartbeat can make your body relax or push you to move. For me, there's a song I associate with late-night drives and the impulse to keep going no matter how tired I am. The tempo and the steady pulse feel like company. For you, it might be a lullaby that docks you instantly to childhood safety, or a summer anthem that opens a window to sunlight and crowds. Music is also communal math. When people clap in time, sing in harmony, or dance to the same beat, we're aligning internal rhythms. That alignment creates a shared emotional state, which is why concerts feel like a single organism breathing. Even silence plays a role. A well-placed pause stretches the brain's need to predict, and that stretch converts into emotional color when the sound returns. So when you next catch yourself humming absent-mindedly or misting up at a bridge, remember, it's not just feeling without form, it's emotion translated into air, a precise interplay of vibration and expectation that your brain reads like a story. And because those stories are tied to your life, a few notes can carry entire rooms of memory. Water. It's the quiet shapeshifter we forget is miraculous until it's missing. Think about the last time you put a glass to your lips. That cold clarity sliding down your throat is not just hydration, it's ancient choreography. Every sip you take has been around the block. Mountains, oceans, clouds, sometimes frozen, sometimes vapor, sometimes running down a street gutter, always remembering the conditions it has felt. There's a strange, almost magical fact about water. It's the only common substance that expands when it freezes. That quirk is why ice floats and why lakes freeze from the top down instead of solidifying into a tomb for the life below. Because ice sits on the surface, it insulates the liquid beneath, letting fish survive the winter. That one physical oddity has shaped ecosystems, climates, and even the way continents have been carved over eons. Glaciers, compact collections of frozen water, act like slow-moving knives, scouring bedrock and sculpting valleys. Think about that when you trace the edge of a stream. Centuries of pressure, temperature shifts, and time have written themselves into its path. I like to imagine each drop carries a tiny logbook. It remembers the pressure it's experienced, buried deep under snow, squashed in a pipe, lifted by a storm. It remembers the temperature swings, baked on a summer rooftop, chilled in alpine air. It remembers time, not as a calendar, but as a sequence of shapes, a cloud, a sheet of ice, a river. These memories are literally encoded in the state of the water and the way it moves. When a drop splashes on your face, it's bringing a history with it. That idea somehow makes the mundane intimate. Your morning cup of tea isn't just a drink, it's a bridge to the past. Water shapes more than landscapes. It shapes weather and, in a way, memory. Weather systems are conversations between air and moisture. A warm breeze picks up humidity. That vapor becomes a cloud. A cloud becomes rain that writes new lines in soil, nourishes seeds, and triggers stories. Laughter on a rainy afternoon or the hush of walking home under an umbrella. Those moments stitch into our personal maps. A smell of wet pavement can bring back a childhood afternoon with startling clarity because water was there, altering the scent molecules we remember. There's something humbling in knowing the molecules inside you have been here for billions of years, just passing through new shapes. You are a temporary arrangement of a very patient substance. That shouldn't make us small, it should make us careful. When we waste water or pollute it, we're scrawling over pages of that ancient logbook. When we sit beside a river, we're reading a story older than most languages. Next time you watch rain, sip a glass, or skate on a frozen pond, let yourself feel that continuity. Water connects weather, memory, and continents, and it connects you to a lineage that stretches back to the first oceans. Every drop is a traveler, and for a moment, it's traveling with you. Nostalgia. Nostalgia is that warm rush that arrives when a song from your teenage years comes on, when you open a box of old photos, or when you catch the smell of something that instantly takes you back. It feels like a hug from the past. But underneath that comfort is a quieter truth. Nostalgia is born out of loss. We miss what used to be, and our minds find a way to soothe that ache. Biologically, there's a reason it feels so good. When you let yourself sink into a remembered moment, your grandmother's kitchen, the late-night laughs in a dorm room, the creak of a porch swing, the brain rewards you. It releases chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin, and even small doses of endorphins. Those chemicals say, in effect, you're safe, and your heart rate slows, your breathing eases, and for a beat, you feel secure. That biochemical reward is what makes nostalgia addictive. Remembering becomes a shortcut to comfort. But the catch is this: the past can't return. The kitchen where you learned to bake isn't the same kitchen. The people who filled that room have changed or gone, and the exact moment you remember is irretrievable. Nostalgia doesn't bring the past back. It imitates the safety we once had and tricks the body into feeling it again. That's why the emotion is so bittersweet, warmth and loss wrapped together. You get the glow of a memory and the sting of knowing it's over. Think about the specifics: a worn baseball glove that still smells like summer, a cassette tape jammed with mixtapes you made for someone who lives miles away now, the threadbare sweater you keep because it still fits around a memory more than a body. Those sensory anchors, the smell, sound, texture, are what trigger the flood of comfort. They're cues your brain has learned to associate with safety and belonging. That doesn't mean nostalgia is a trap to avoid. It's a coping mechanism that can restore perspective, remind you of who you were, and reconnect you to people and values you care about. The important part is knowing what it is: a temporary refuge, not a way to live. Let it warm you, let it heal you for a moment, but come back to the present with a little more clarity and a little more compassion for the person you used to be. Electricity isn't just power lines and light bulbs, it's the nervous system of reality. When I talk about electricity, I don't mean a dry physics lecture, I mean something you feel. That tiny zap when you touch a doorknob in winter, the dramatic crack of a summer thunderstorm, the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat. All of those are the same story told in different voices. Imbalance seeking order. Think about electrons as the tiny messengers racing through copper wires, through the air during a storm, and even through the cells in your body. In a wire, they shuffle along in a mostly obedient line, powering the lamp that lets you read late at night. In the air, given the right push and difference in charge, they explode into a lightning bolt that momentarily rewrites the sky. Inside you, streams of charged particles whisper to your muscles and brain, telling your heart to beat, your fingers to curl, your thoughts to spark into words. That connection makes electricity surprisingly personal. When you feel your phone buzz in your pocket, what you're sensing is the result of engineered imbalances. Tiny changes in electric potential routed through a circuit board, turned into a physical vibration and a signal that something in your life needs attention. When you place your hand on someone else's and feel a slight static shock, it's a flash reminder that we're all part conductor, part organism. The same rules that send bolts from clouds also govern the electrochemical dances in your neurons when you remember a face or decide to reach for a cup of coffee. Every spark is nature's way of closing a gap. Imagine two people arguing across a table. A spark is them saying, "Enough, let's connect." Lightning is the universe taking that to the extreme. Massive charge differences finally leap through air because the system prefers balance. In quieter places, electrons find gentler routes. The synapses between your neurons permit tiny ion flows that code experiences, form habits, and make memories. Your whole sense of self folds out from these microscopic rearrangements. We also live with electricity as a tool. Civilization leans on wires and batteries to move energy where it's needed, converting chemical or mechanical energy into controlled flows of electrons. But tools also mirror deeper truths. The fact that order arises from resolving imbalance. Flip a switch and a filament lights up. The tiny chaos of random electron motion channels into a steady glow. That steady glow, whether in a street lamp or in the warm pulse of affection when a friend answers your call, feels like balance restored. So when you next watch lightning stitch the sky or feel the quiet steadying of a heart, remember you're witnessing the same principle. Electricity is not just something we harness. It's the subtle language reality uses to mend differences, to transmit information, to move us. It flows through copper, through clouds, and through you, and each spark is a story of imbalance reaching for order, dreaming. There's a peculiar logic to dreaming, one that feels less like a straight line and more like a painter's palette melting into motion. When I drift into REM sleep, the world I carry into bed doesn't disappear. It rearranges, faces blend together, places mutate, and the rules that run waking life take a holiday. What makes that odd theatre so striking is how urgent everything feels. A split second in a dream can hammer your chest as if it's life or death. Scientists now think that urgency is part of the point. During REM, the brain is busy sorting emotion through metaphor. It doesn't label feelings with tidy words. Instead, it stitches memory fragments into weird symbolic stories. Your childhood house collapsing into a subway car, an old teacher appearing in your mirror, or the endless race toward a door that keeps moving away. Those bizarre images aren't random noise. They're a language your brain uses to translate raw emotion into experience you can work with. Think about common dream themes you've had. Exams, falling, being chased, losing teeth. They're recurring because they're excellent emotional shorthand. An exam isn't really about a test, it's about being judged or fear of not measuring up. Falling compresses the sensation of losing control into a vivid physical drama. Teeth falling out often taps into anxieties about appearance or communication. By dressing these feelings up in metaphor, dreams let you rehearse responses without the full stakes of real life. REM sleep is the lab where this rehearsal happens. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, lights up, while parts of the prefrontal cortex that enforce strict logic dim down. That's why reasoning melts. Emotional intensity remains high. but the bar for metaphor is low. Memories and fragments mingle, a song on the radio, a smell of rain, a conversation you overheard. The result is a mini-movie that trains you subtly. You practice making choices, confronting threats, surviving social scenes, all in surreal code. I started noticing this when I kept having variations of the same dream after a stressful week at work. At first it felt pointless, just a weird nuisance. But after I began jotting down details in the morning, a pattern emerged. The chaos in the dream mirrored the anxiety I was avoiding while awake. Seeing it on paper made the metaphor less terrifying and more useful. It was like getting a rough rehearsal of how I might face a difficult conversation, only less scripted and more honest. That's the hopeful part. Dreams are resilience work. They don't erase fear, but they let you meet it in softer light. They recombine pieces of our lives so we can test outcomes and integrate emotions that we can't tidy up during the day. If you treat dreams as a strange private coaching session, their urgency makes sense. It's practice. The language is surreal, but the lesson is familiar. You're learning to cope, to adapt, and to move forward, one metaphor at a time. Focus is attention narrowed to a single thread. Think of it like zooming in with a magnifying glass. Everything else fades to the background, and the thing you care about becomes impossibly clear. That clarity feels like control, like you've tamed your day. But what we call control is really a process of exclusion. Your brain is quietly deciding that doesn't matter about dozens of other threads, and the ones it ignores are as important as the one it chooses. I notice this most when I try to write. At first, the act of focusing feels like winning. Words flow, time stretches, and for an hour the world outside my screen seems distant. But afterward, I'm drained in a way that a good workout drains you, not sore, but empty. That's because focus isn't free, it burns glucose. Your neurons are firing hard, your body actually spends energy to keep irrelevant thoughts out of the room. There's a second cost that's less obvious: silence. Not just the absence of noise, but the deliberate quieting of internal commentary. To focus, you have to hush the mind's running commentary. The shoulds, the grocery lists, the worry about a text you haven't answered. That hush is a form of labor. It requires practice, and sometimes it requires permission. Permission to let some things not get your attention. Because focus feels like control, we treat it like an inexhaustible superpower. We try to apply it to everything. That's the trap. Focus is scarce and selective. If you burn a solid 2-hour block on one problem, you've chosen, implicitly, what won't get your attention during that time. That's okay if you chose well, but if you're reactive, you'll spend your limited focus on the urgent and miss the important. So how do we respect the cost? First, treat focus like a resource to budget. Block your day into small, intentional windows instead of expecting marathon concentration throughout. 2 to 4 focused sessions of 45-60 minutes will often outperform 8 scattered hours of multitasking. Second, make the exclusion explicit. Before you start, name what you are allowing yourself to ignore. Notifications, email, social obligations, even the idea that you must be productive every minute. Saying it out loud removes the guilt and makes the boundary stronger. Finally, remember to refuel. If focus consumes glucose and silence, then refuel with brief physical breaks, water, snacks, or a short walk. The silence can be maintained by tiny rituals, a 2-minute breathing exercise before you begin, or a playlist that signals work time and reduces mind chatter. Over time, you train your brain to enter focus with less friction and to exit it without burning yourself out. Focus gives you power, but only if you treat it with respect. Decide what you'll let fall away, budget your attention, and build small rituals so that when you do zoom in, you're actually choosing the right thing to make clearer. So, next up, serotonin. If dopamine is the spark that makes you reach, serotonin is the hand that says, that's enough. It doesn't thrill you, it steadies you. Think of it as balance made chemical. The part of your brain that smooths the edges of mood, tucks appetite into place, and whispers you towards sleep. It's not fireworks, it's the steady glow of a lamp. You've probably felt serotonin without knowing the word. Remember the quiet after a good meal when you're not thinking about snacks, when your mind isn't pinging for more. Or the soft relief after an argument is resolved, where nothing feels urgent anymore. That's serotonin, the neurotransmitter of enough, the quiet opposite of craving. Low serotonin doesn't usually make you manic. It makes things flat. The colors of life desaturate. Joy feels distant, not because you're sad in the dramatic sense, but because that steady feeling of sufficiency is missing. Appetite becomes needy, sleep becomes fragile. I want to be honest and a little personal here. I've had weeks where I couldn't find the energy to care about hobbies I used to love. Coffee and screen time made me jittery but didn't fill anything. Looking back, those were times serotonin was low, not a lack of excitement, but a lack of calm. Contrast that with mornings after a few consistent nights of decent sleep and a walk in the sun. I felt quiet inside, less urgent, more satisfied with what I had. That's the other side. Higher serotonin looks like calm, not numbness. It's the internal permission slip to be okay with enough. Serotonin also has a big role in sleep and appetite. It's involved in the cascade that helps you transition into rest and keeps hunger signals from running wild. When it's balanced, you don't overeat to feel better, and your sleep is less interrupted by racing thoughts. When it's low, you might notice restless nights, late-night grazing, or a persistent sense of emptiness that food or scrolling can't fix. Small, everyday choices can gently nudge serotonin toward that balanced state. Sunlight, especially in the morning, matters. Regular movement, even a brisk walk, helps maintain it. Predictable routines for meals and sleep give the brain an anchor. Social connection, not as entertainment but as real warmth, also supports that steady, enough feeling. None of this is a magic bullet, but these are practical ways to build an internal environment where serotonin can do its job. So think of serotonin as your internal ballast. It doesn't shout, it steadies. When it's working, life feels like a calm harbor instead of a shore you're always running toward. With that grounded sense in mind, we'll move on to another chemical that pulls the opposite direction and how the two interact. Cloud computing. Think about the last time you reached for your phone to find a song, a photo, or a note from 6 months ago. The cloud isn't in the sky. It's millions of servers humming in synchronized rhythm, storing your photos, music, and thoughts. Every upload is a tiny piece of your mind living somewhere else. That image sounds a little eerie until you realize how ordinary it is. When you snap a picture, save a draft, or add a song to a playlist, that data leaves your device and is copied, catalogued, and kept warm on machines you'll never see, so it's there the next time you need it. For most of us, the cloud is pure convenience. I remember panicking when I dropped my phone and the screen went dark. Logging in on a borrowed laptop and seeing the same photos I'd taken the week before felt like a rescue. No frantic transfers, no wondering which device had the latest file. Photos, contacts, messages, even app settings, all of it quietly syncing so my life feels continuous across devices. It's also the invisible glue behind collaboration. Turning a draft into a live document that 3 people can edit at once changed deadlines and brainstorming. Watching a teammate leave a comment while I revise a slide, in real time, from different cities, removes whole steps from the old email it back and forth rhythm. The cloud makes shared work feel immediate, which is why remote teams can feel just as connected as in-person ones. But handing pieces of your life over to distant machines carries trade-offs. Who can access those files? How long are backups kept? What happens when a company changes its terms? Big providers invest massively in security, encryption at rest and in transit, strict access controls, regular audits. Yet breaches and policy shifts still happen. That's why practicality beats panic. Use 2-factor authentication, check app permissions, and choose services with transparent privacy practices. For really sensitive material, prefer end-to-end encrypted options and keep a local backup you control so you aren't entirely dependent on one company. There are also other dimensions people don't always think about: latency and locality. Streaming a movie from a nearby server is faster than pulling it from across the ocean, and that's why companies place data centers in many regions. There's an environmental cost too. Those rows of servers use power and cooling, so some providers now advertise renewable energy use or carbon offset programs. If you care about sustainability, look into provider practices or reduce redundant backups you don't need. A few small habits make a big difference. Periodically prune old backups and files you no longer need, export important archives to your own drive, and lean on encrypted services for passwords and private notes. Read the privacy settings on the apps you use and turn off automatic uploads for things you'd rather keep local. Those little decisions let you enjoy the cloud's magic without surrendering control. Ultimately, the cloud gives you freedom. Access anywhere, restore when lost, collaborate instantly. It also asks for responsibility. A handful of habits that keep those millions of humming servers working for you, not quietly making decisions about your digital life. Take a minute today to look at what you've entrusted to the cloud and decide what deserves to stay.